Hi, in this video I'm going to be discussing the human gait cycle, but I'm going to be doing it walking code style. When I say walking code style, I mean we're not going to be simply looking at the positions of the feet and the legs as they go through the gait cycle. We're going to be looking at how we use our mind connected to our core to create a real functional gait with maximum fluidity and efficiency and minimal impact on the joints. For some of you, a discussion of the human gait cycle may not sound exciting, but this is really important. And I would say that if you were going to watch one of my videos all the way through from stem to stern, make it this video. If you're going to share one of my videos, make it this video. If you're going to watch one of my videos 18 times in a row and really make it yours, make it this video. I'm going to be discussing some things in this video that I haven't discussed in any of my other previous videos. So if you've seen a lot of my other work, please watch this whole video because we're adding a little bit of nuance that I haven't covered before. And of course, when you finish with this video, you can go back to my other playlists and binge watch them like you're watching Game of Thrones. But I promise I'm not going to jack up the ending. Let's define what the human gait cycle is. The human gait cycle follows the path of one leg as it goes through a full stride. Now, what is the difference between a step and a stride? A step follows the path of the body from the placement of one heel, for instance, my right heel, to the placement of the next heel, which is the left heel. In a stride, we are really taking two steps, and so we're following the body from the placement of one heel, in this case the right heel, all the way to the placement of that heel the second time. The gait cycle is broken up into two phases, the stance phase and the swing phase. In the stance phase of gait, the leg that we're looking at will be in contact with the ground the entire time. In the swing phase, that leg separates from the ground and the swing phase ends when heel contact is made again. In this video, we're going to look at each phase of gait and we're going to look at what the body is doing to create that functional movement. In addition to the two primary phases of gait, the stance phase and the swing phase, we also break the gait cycle down into smaller bits based on what function is occurring at one particular time. The stride begins with initial contact with the heel on the ground. This is going to be the initial contact and the beginning of the first phase of gait. The first phase of the stance phase is going to be the loading response phase. During the loading response, the weight is changed to the standing leg and the forefoot is lowered to the ground and all of the weight is removed from the swing leg, which is trailing behind. So all of my weight during the loading response is going to be on this right leg with the foot flat on the ground. After the loading response phase, we have the initiation of single leg stance. In single leg stance, only one leg is on the ground and the other leg is swinging. The first phase of single leg stance is the mid-stance phase. During the mid-stance phase, we go from the end of the loading response phase to the beginning of the heel lift phase. During this time, my standing leg is going to be flat on the ground and I'm going to be stepping forward as my swing leg moves forward, and the swing leg is going to move to a point where the knee is forward and the tibia is going to be slightly forward. In the heel lift phase, the heel of the standing leg is going to come off the ground and that is going to end when the swing leg makes initial contact. The heel lift phase ends when we reach double leg stance again. So both feet are now on the ground. The heel of the standing leg is slightly lifted off the ground, and the heel of the new standing leg has just placed. After the heel is lifted from the ground, we have the pre-swing phase. This is the final stance phase of gait. Pre-swing is going to begin at heel lift, and it's going to end at toe off. At toe off, the toes of the right foot are going to leave the ground, and that is going to be the initiation of the swing phase. The first part of the swing phase is going to be mid-swing, where the swing leg travels forward from the toe-off position to a position forward of the new standing leg. And then we conclude with terminal swing. Terminal swing is going to occur at the same time the standing leg is going through the heel lift phase. This is the final swing phase and ends when the right heel contacts the ground again. Let's look at what's happening with the core and the legs during each phase of gait. Following initial contact of the heel, we get loading response. During loading response, I'm going to turn my upper torso forward on the right. I'm going to tuck my lower torso on the right, engaging those lower abs, and I'm lifting my left hip or flexing my left hip forward. That's going to shift my weight all over my right leg and lower my forefoot in a controlled fashion. So we have initial contact and loading response. Right upper torso is turning forward, lower torso is turning backwards and tucking the pelvis, and left hip is flexing or lifting forwards. This is the loading response phase, and my left leg is ready to leave the ground at this point in time. Following loading response, we're going to get mid-stance, where I'm going to lift the body forward from my right hip, powering that motion. And of course, I can't stop in midair, but we're going to travel forward, extending my right knee, dorsiflexing my right ankle, and we're going to travel the body forward until my tibia on this leg is about perpendicular to the ground. That's going to be mid-stance. In mid-stance, I'm still turning my upper torso on the right forward. I'm still turning my lower torso on the right backwards, and that's grounding my right leg, and essentially that is what's pushing off the ground. I'm not pushing off the ground with my hips, I'm pushing off the ground with the rotation of the pelvis in this direction. Now that rotation of the pelvis is also bringing my pelvis around, or bringing my swing leg around, and that's part of the mechanics of how that swing leg is going to follow through in the step. So the end of loading response, I lift forwards, continuing to turn my upper torso on the right, tucking my lower torso on the right, and lifting from the hip, and that takes me through the mid-stance phase. The following phase is going to be the heel lift phase, and this is a phase I haven't really described in detail in the past. The heel lift phase is the end of the step where we bring our swing leg heel down in a controlled fashion. The heel lift phase is generated by a motion of the core that is going to bring down the new standing leg, and it's going to lift the heel of the current standing leg. The core movements that are occurring there are, in the walking code, what I call the core technique of retreat. In Tai Chi, it's the fundamental technique of rollback. We have my right hip flexing, my lower torso turning towards that right hip, and I have my upper torso turning towards the right hip. I want you to practice this so you can get a feeling of what happens as you lift up from this hip, meaning like lifting your knee forward, and turn your upper and lower torso towards that leg. And you'll get this pointed foot action. Let me do that again. So you can see as you do this, rotating everything here, that foot naturally points, and you see how the heel lifts off the ground as I do that. This is the core technique of retreat, or the Tai Chi technique of rollback. This is what's going on during the heel lift phase of the step. So we can see how the whole body is coordinating to make the step happen. It's not stuff that's just going on at the leg level, not the ankles and not the knees. It is everything. My upper torso, lower torso, hip action, knee action, and ankle action are all completely coordinated. The heel lift occurs as soon as we begin turning my left side of the upper torso forward in conjunction with the engagement of my right lower abs and my right hip joint. So as I'm stepping, and I'll just pause in this balanced position here, I'm going to turn my left side of the upper torso forward. That's going to bring my heel to the ground, and you notice it's going to lift my right heel from the ground. During the heel lift portion of the step, when you're standing on your right leg, your upper torso is going to turn towards that right leg, lower torso is going to turn towards the right leg, and that's going to generate more extension of the knee and plantar flexion of the ankle, and that is what is going to bring your heel off the ground, and that is what's going to bring the heel of your swing leg down in a controlled fashion. After we have initial contact with the heel of the new swing leg, our right leg that we're following through the gait cycle is in heel lift portion, and this is the beginning of the pre-swing phase. The pre-swing phase for my right leg is going to be the loading response phase of my left leg. So as I change weight to the left leg, now turning my upper torso forward on the left, my lower torso engaged on the left, my right hip flexing forward, we have the pre-swing phase of my right leg, which brings the heel way up, only connecting my ball of the foot or the toes of the foot to the ground. This is the point where the right leg is ready to lift off to begin the swing phase. The swing phase of my right leg is going to begin as the mid-stance phase of my left leg begins. So as I lift off with my left leg, my right leg is going to swing forward, ending at the end of mid-swing, which is the same as the end of mid-stance for the standing leg. And then I'm going to rotate my upper torso forward on the right to initiate that next heel contact and the heel lift of my left leg. Now, one of the things in the gait cycle that I don't necessarily agree with is calling the initial contact of the heel the beginning of a step, because we are bringing down that heel for heel contact and generating the heel lift by engaging the other side of the torso. So when I'm stepping forward with my left leg, my right side of the torso is going forward. And when I start the next step, I engage the left side of the torso to begin the step with the right leg. But the rotation of the left side of the torso to begin the next step is really the initiation of that next step, and that actually is the terminal swing phase for the swing leg, and that is the terminal stance phase or the heel lift phase for the standing leg. So really the terminal swing, terminal stance phase of a step is actually the beginning of the next step and not the end of the previous step. When I'm going and walking like this, and I'm going to start the next step, I start the next step by rotating the body, and that's what brings the foot down to start the next step. Only after I engage the upper torso on the left to bring down the heel do I then engage the lower torso on the left that brings my body through the loading response phase of the step. Then I generate the mid-stance phase by lifting off with my left hip, and then we continue the cycle all over again. It's important to know when we're initiating the energy that starts a new step. That energy is coming from the rotation of the opposite side upper torso. So when I'm stepping with the left swing leg, I'm going to bring that swing leg to the ground by rotating my left upper torso, and then I'm going to trigger the loading response phase by tucking my pelvis, meaning activating my lower abs on the left side, and that brings the body through the loading response phase. If we are going to be turning, let's say I'm going to be turning to the right as I'm walking, instead of activating that heel drop with the upper torso on the left and then engaging the lower torso on the left for loading response, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the heel down with the upper torso, and I'm going to continue lifting forward from my right hip and continue engagement of my right side of the lower torso as I shift my weight forward. And you'll notice that this is the retreat technique that we use during heel lift in the normal step. We're going to use this same retreat movement if I'm going to generate a turn. So now I've got plantar flexion of my right ankle, extension of my right knee, lower torso's turning to the right, upper torso's turning to the right. I did not change my weight to my left leg as I would if I was walking forward, because my intention is not to go that way, my intention is to go that way. Now, when I initiate the swing through, I end up with a turning step. There you can see the difference between how we engage our core and what it does to the step. If I engage the lower abs on the left during the loading response, I'm going to walk forward. If I continue the lower abs engaged on the right side during the loading response and then change during the swing through, I'm going to get a turn to the right. After I turn to the right, and I want to continue turning to the right, now you can see my upper torso is already engaged on the left, and what I need to initiate the next step is not a turning of the upper torso, but actually a turning of the lower torso, which means my belly button is going to go, and that's going to generate the motion for the next loading response phase in a turning step. Now I can swing through and then engage the left side of the core to bring the heel down. Then I can swing through. Now I engage the lower abs to bring the foot down. Now I swing through, bring the upper abs to engage the next step. So when we're walking in a circle, we're using a different sequence of core actions to trigger the gait cycle, and the gait cycle actually occurs in a different manner. So thanks for watching.